This is probably one of the most important and consequential crypto and XRP updates you're going to watch all year, because what Trump just did is going to have massive implications on the markets through the rest of the summer and potentially even into the end of this upcoming year. And if you aren't paying attention, you could possibly lose everything. Now, maybe this isn't news to you, but out of the blue and overnight, markets truly weren't expecting this. Trump decided to drop 3 bombs in Iran for what many are calling an act of war. And just yesterday, he shared this post on Truth Social that they completed a successful attack on 3 nuclear sites in Iran, that a full payload of bombs was dropped, and that now, after doing that, is the time for peace. Markets took that and ran with it and are in full panic mode. And just this morning, we saw over $1 billion over the last 24 hours in futures liquidations, which rarely ever happens except in the event of major news. And now we've seen the crypto market take a nearly $500 billion loss off the local highs for a 14% dip. So is this the start of a very long, drawn-out war in the Middle East? Is this the start to a new bear market, or is now the time to start accumulating? Well, stay tuned, because we'll cover that in this video, as well as Trump's recent post on Jerome Powell and chairman of the Fed, which is now looking like we're even starting a government war against the central bank that he operates. Alongside this latest post from Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong on the urgency of using crypto now and how adoption needs to rapidly increase among all the chaos going on in today's world. Also, before we dive into the video, if you haven't already, head on over to Bull Runners HQ on Twitter or X. Check out the pin post in order for a chance to win $100 worth of XRP in our weekly giveaway. Every single week, we give away another $100 worth of XRP. In this upcoming week, the winner could be you. We do choose them completely at random, but they do need to follow through with all 3 of these steps, and we double verify that you've done that before we hand you the money. First, you need to follow this account, like, retweet, and comment XRP, and then subscribe to our daily crypto newsletter by clicking on this link or just heading on over to bullrunners.com. And either way, you're going to get access to this free guidebook, which unlocks the 23 secrets to helping you become a crypto millionaire this bull market cycle. As always, my friend, even if you're not feeling too bullish, if you're still feeling blessed, comment 777. And if you're going to be the wealthiest person in your family tree, smash the subscribe button. Hello and welcome back to the channel, my friend. If you're new here, my name is Paul, and you can find me on Twitter or X at PauliDeFi, PauliDeFi. Really quickly, we're going to start with this video of Donald Trump at his last presidential press release on the developing situation in Iran, between Israel, Iran, and now the United States, after we dropped bombs, which did cause the markets to panic and sell off, and arguably start the very beginning of a new bear market trend. Still, it's important to pay attention to what he says, because every single word is not only going to be listened to very closely, but applied to a market approach and strategy by major institutions and investors, as the worries become more serious surrounding potential threats and attacks now on American soil by Iranian government officials and acts of terror.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
And so no matter how we spin it or what Trump says about whether or not Iran should respond in like, otherwise we will obliterate Iran, at the end of the day, this has stoked a lot of anger and fear in the market, which is going to cause a sell-off. Investors and market participants do not like to hold through periods of uncertainty, so they'd rather protect their portfolio and sell any positions, which could cause cascading liquidations and new lows. Either way, after a massive airstrike, Trump says it is time for peace with Iran. However, I'm in agreement. It may not be up to him. Yes, we could easily win this war, but that's still going to affect the market, and markets won't like that. As U.S. officials have signaled that in their view, Saturday's strike was a one-off intervention and that they now seek de-escalation. Iran has vowed to hit back at American interests, and that could include oil, which will send the markets into total turmoil, and Israeli leaders have told its citizens to be prepared for a long campaign. So it doesn't sound like Iran wants to completely de-escalate. It sounds like Israel wants this war to continue, and somewhere in the middle, the U.S. will be involved. That's just the reality of the situation, and because we have a lot of interest over in the Middle East when it comes to oil. In other words, we will bomb, they will bomb. We are in a stuck of some sort of carousel, and markets are already pricing a bit of that in. Now, the sad reality is the fact that nobody wins in this situation. There's a lot of hate between neighbors in the Middle East, and the U.S. has a lot of interest in the Middle East when it comes to oil. Iran can probably launch missiles at Israel for another month, which is actually not that long. In the end, the Israelis' air superiority will make it impossible for Iran to outlast them. In other words, Israel can bomb them at its pleasure, and nobody is actually coming to their aid. And so for that reason alone, Iran will be under pressure to respond militarily, as one imagines that maintaining its rule is now the #1 priority of the regime. And left and right all over social media, everyone is in limbo about whether or not there's going to be a regime change. As Trump said, if they don't work to make Iran great again, then there should be a regime change. Then you have politicians and the vice president saying, we don't want a regime change, we want to end their nuclear program. But everyone believes and knows that if anything else escalates, we are going to be involved, and things are going to get worse for markets either way. You've got a ton of people on the left calling Trump out on the regime change term, and a lot of people believe that that's exactly what we're after, even though we're not saying it. We know one thing for a fact, though, that Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu are 100% about dominance in the Middle East as an Israeli state, and are more than after a regime change. As Israel is one of the US's allies, we're likely going to fund this or stoke more anger and even acts of war. And if all of this news and uncertainty wasn't enough, to make matters worse, Donald Trump seems to be on a scorched earth approach to everything, and that includes the Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell. Now, again, I don't stand on the side of the Federal Reserve. I also don't stand on the side of war. There's a lot going on that personally I don't like, and everyone's got an opinion about it. Ultimately, all I'm after is to share the news and what's going to affect your portfolio and the market. I'm totally in agreement that the Federal Reserve is one big fraud, but ultimately, if you have the president, the sitting president of the United States, fighting with and trashing the Federal Reserve chairman, that is either way going to create even more uncertainty for markets and potentially more of a sell-off. As Donald Trump called Powell too late Powell, and all that he has to do for our country in order to help is by lowering interest rates, and if he reduced them to like 1 to 2%, he would save the United States $1 trillion per year. But Trump went on a full-blown name-calling rant, calling him a numbskull, calling him a dumb guy and an obvious Trump hater, and finally a total and complete moron. This does not send confidence into markets that everyone is working in union in one direction as the United States. The markets are going to price that in by selling off even further. And amid all of this uncertainty, Brian Armstrong, Coinbase's CEO, had to weigh in, stating that the world needs crypto now more than ever, as debt is growing exponentially, inflation is crippling entire nations, and now including our own, and economic freedom is is declining. And then obviously what they're doing, and he's pitching Coinbase in order to solve these problems. However, some of the key points are the fact that the US federal government debt is expanding exponentially, and that would definitely be due to this big, beautiful bill that Trump wanted to pass, which is now getting slimmer and slimmer while it's going through Congress. But at the end of the day, adding trillions of dollars to our deficit is not a good idea. And this just isn't a US problem, he's actually stating. It's a global one across all democracies. In other words, fiat currencies always are inflationary. They're never anything but that. And there's really only one solution, and that is obviously Bitcoin. People are using Bitcoin as a hedge against fiat currencies, reckless governments, and a lot of that flow will enter crypto as a general market. But still, in times of uncertainty, crypto is treated as a risk-on asset. So in the long term, crypto adoption is extremely important. In the short term, it might experience the volatility alongside the S&P and the NASDAQ and the Dow Jones and whatever else is out there. And so then he goes on to explain how Coinbase is solving all of these problems in the current financial system that are getting worse, how crypto is eating the financial services industry, and a lot of that money will be moved on chain into USDC or RLUSD stable coins, and how Coinbase is leading the charge in this global financial change, which I'm in total agreement about. So again, in the long term, we are still in a very bullish uptrend. In the short term, we might actually see some more sell pressure. So now what we'll do is head on over to the charts. We'll start with Bitcoin because this is going to lead the market, and then we'll look at XRP and let you know some realistic price targets and ranges to look out for. Now that said, if you know anything about this channel or anything that I've covered in the past, it's the fact that in the 2020 to 2021 bull market, we almost saw the exact same textbook play before Bitcoin topped off at about $69,000 and dumped all the way to a low of $15,600 for about a year-long bear market with all sorts of crazy collapses and crashes due to fraud and all sorts of mismanagement from crypto companies. That said, you can see that Bitcoin put in a local high in April of 2021. Then it put in a new high 6 months later in November, only to break right back down below its prior range high and start a prolonged bear market. And if you were to actually look at this current chart, it looks extremely similar, especially on the weekly time frame. We have our prior range highs right here of about $104,000, a breakout to a new high of 112, and then a lot of sell pressure between 109 down to 105 to a break below and a new range low on a weekly time frame, which could be the start of a prolonged bear market. And so when in doubt, I like to zoom out and then I like to zoom in after I get that perspective. As you can see here, we have quite a strong range of resistance between 106 down to 104 with a top right here at 112 and a new lower high. Now we have an intermediate term downtrend yet again. We have a new lower high, we have a new lower low. This is a textbook downtrend. So even if Bitcoin was going to break right back up to that 103 range, it's going to see a lot of overhead resistance, and it's going to be very difficult in this market environment for it to succeed. Now, when you toss that 50 EMA on there, you can see that in the past breakdown in June, it acted as a support, but now we're breaking down and actually selling off below the range for a new trend, which leads me to that 200 EMA. And it's not like I always use the 200 EMA. I rarely use it for anything other than the fact that I want to look at the trend. Yes, the trend is still up. However, it's very much possible and potential we at least break down to now $93,000, which if we did, off those local lows to that all-time high would be just above that 0.5 retrace. And so at this moment in time, it's actually likely that not only do we hit the $93,000 to $91,000 range, but we break even lower to the $87,000 to $85,000 range before we see any sort of bounce or support. Now, this isn't me trying to spread fear, but if this does happen, the rest of the crypto market is really going to feel that impact, as when Bitcoin dumps maybe 10%, most cryptos are dumping 20 to 30%. 30%. And so XRP is now trading right back below that 200 EMA, seeing resistance at the 50 EMA and failing to put in new highs. It had its last shot and exhaustion pump up to 233 on June 16th, but failed to break out and only saw sell pressure right thereafter, which leads me to believe that XRP is going to go lower, as it's now not only below the 200-day EMA, but it's below the $2.08 range, which was its support. We have a textbook downtrend, in a longer term downtrend going back to January. So this summer might not look too good for XRP. I'm thoroughly expecting over the upcoming weeks, whether it's tomorrow based on news, market open, or whether it's within a month, for XRP to likely hit that 180 range, potentially all the way down to 145, which I've been talking about for quite some time now. And it seems like it's more likely to play out. Yes, I'm going short XRP, and it's not because I'm bearish long-term XRP. Long-term, I'm very bullish, but it's far more likely I'm going to be able to buy on these dips a lot better into a longer-term uptrend, especially if you were to take the local lows of this range all the way up to that all-time high right here. You can see that we don't see any real support, at least on a fib scale, down to the 3.8, which is 160, all the way down to about a buck at the 618, which is kind of your golden ratio. And if I were to take a box or support trend line, or better yet, just a support line, and drag it all the way back, you can see that we have a lot of support down into this range from prior range highs, and then our all-time local high in July on the news that XRP is not a security. So it's very much possible that XRP can puke because it's got a long way to move down. So I don't want to be too bearish right now, but I do want to buy better dips, and I do want to prepare. And if you're not prepared and you're in this market, yes, you might still be in profit because you're accumulating at 64 cents, but why not save yourself all of that downside? Because if we even go to, let's say, 145, that's still a 26% loss. And in order to make that money back to break even, you would need to see the market return 35+%. And in this current market environment, 35% is a big move, which is unlikely with all of the uncertainty and chaos going on right now at the highest levels of government. And so this is something I've been calling for quite some time. And if you were privy to the charts and were able to do technical analysis for yourself, you would have probably been out of the market already and sitting on the sidelines with some cash ready to buy these dips. That said, this is something that I teach only for our Altcoin Pro University members, where I host live calls every single Tuesday. And this upcoming Tuesday on the 24th, I will be hosting a live call where you can actually ask me questions, and I'll teach you everything you need to know about looking on a chart so you can make your own educated decisions. But that's not all. If you were to head over to the classroom, you can see I actually put together a course called Technical Analysis Essentials, and I teach you everything from creating your own game plan to using TradingView, the most powerful tool on the planet, to drawing tools, to line charts, to candlesticks, bearish and bullish patterns, candlesticks on different time frames. I even give you all sorts of resources alongside what I like to call the 4 horsemen of technical analysis. And if you were to just use these 4 things, you would be better than 99% of people on the planet when it comes to looking at a chart and making strong and sound decisions about what to do with your portfolio, which could make you a lot of money. But that's not all we offer. We also have something called our DeFi Yield Quick Win. And every single week, one of our analysts hops in here and shares a video step-by-step on how to put your money to work for you. In other words, if you're already sitting on crypto, you might as well be earning yield on it, which can actually cover the cost of your membership. And we have tons of people that literally have their yields paying for their membership, which is only $97 a month. And if we can't help you to do at least that inside of this community, then go ahead and ask for your refund within 14 days. We'll give it back to you. It's absolutely no worries, but you have nothing to lose and everything to gain by simply going to altcoinpro.com, watching this quick video to see all the things that we have to offer. And bar none, I can guarantee that we are one of the best platforms on planet Earth when when it comes to your crypto education, giving you the right tools, training, resources, and all sorts of guides, mentorship, and help constantly to help you reach your crypto goals. So if that sounds interesting, head on over to Altcoin Pro. Thanks so much for watching this video, my friend. Until next time, goodbye.